everybody, welcome to this month's Backstage Inspiration with our coach and speaker, Karen Yates.
Yay.
We do these interviews every month to give you some inspiration from your peers, so other speakers and authors and coaches that are doing really great things in their work. They're really successful at what they're doing, and they're doing things differently, because we can teach you all the foundational things, but these guys are actually out there doing it, and they've got tips and ways of doing it that are just shaking it up a bit and doing it their way on their terms.
Yay.
So this is why we bring them in every month, so you can get some inspiration, some insight, and some real in-depth knowledge onto how to implement what we teach you on a practical basis. And we've known Karen for a long time. We've worked together with her, and that's really one of the reasons why we wanted to bring her on, because we've watched her develop over how many years would you say it's been now, Karen?
About 3 years since we've known each other, I guess.
So since Karen made that big jump to set up her own business and come into the world of being an entrepreneur, we've seen her deep dive into all the information, soak it up like a sponge, but then do something with it, right? Put it into action and test it, and then go back and tweak it so it's her way, not just the way that she's been told to do it, because that doesn't always work. And I think before we go into the questions, Karen, that's one of the reasons why, as I said, we brought you on, is because in the 90-day program that we teach one of the things is product funnel and the product range, and that your product should start at a low price or free and go up incrementally, solve a problem at each stage, and the price increases and the time that they get with you increases. Now, what I'd love for you to start us off with today is to tell us how you completely threw that model on its head and did it your way, because that model didn't work. So if you can tell us a little bit about your product funnel doesn't go deep, it goes wide, and why you did that, that'd be awesome.
Okay, so I guess, as I say, I had this sort of, I've been doing lots of things for different years under my own steam, but when I came into this world 2014 and started to learn about how all this worked, I was really taken by storm by the whole concept of this product funnel. This business model that said people start at the top and work their way down. So by the time I'd done my quest and my learning from all sorts of places, including becoming part of the team with you guys and working closely with you, I'd got a fabulous sales funnel. So we arrived here in Scotland to a brand new place with no friends, no contacts, no family, and I had every product sorted, done, dusted. I knew what was coming next. I got the outline for everything. I got the whole of certain things in the funnel. I knew exactly where I was going with it. And then I came out here and realised that part of the reason we'd moved to Scotland was because it wasn't London and it wasn't England. And actually, part of that charm was the fact that this stuff really wasn't going to work here straight off. I went out networking straight away. I set myself 90 days of massive action to meet 1,000 people at business networking.
Which is so
I've never done business networking before, so it was something new to me. So I gave myself 8 weeks up to my first event to do this. And on day one, I went out feeling confident that I'd got my shield. I knew what I was doing. I knew the date for my event. I knew what I was plugging, what I was going to talk to them about. And I knew all of the things in the funnel before it and after it. And this was perfect. And then I met them all and thought, I could be wrong, but I don't think this is going to work here.
But Karen, why was that? What was the difference between Scotland and, say, London?
Because I'd never met so many people in one room, every networking I went to, who would spend so much time passionately telling me how much they hated social media, Facebook, and everything digital. And I was moving to Scotland to open a digital business. This was the difference between my 6-figure business before and the business I was setting up here. Was this one was going to help me to leverage 7 figures because it was based on digital. And I suddenly realised that this networking thing I was doing as a bit of a starter, this was the way they did business here. And I would have to create then a series of products. And is it Seth Godin, I think, says, don't go out and create products and find customers for them. Go out, meet your customers and make products for your customers. And that's literally what I had to do. I used that 8 weeks. I met 1,017 people in 8 weeks.
Amazing.
And by the time I got to my first boot camp, really, I'd had to make up what was the next product after a boot camp.
What was in the room?
And I had to adapt everything. Thinking, well, they were just not going to buy 2 days worth of a program of a workshop from me. It wasn't going to happen.
And so it was the fact that they weren't as clued up on the digital age. but it was also price points for that market as
Price
well.
points, yeah, hugely different, yes. So I'd already dumbed them down from what I would be doing in London. And thought, well, that's a reasonable price for 2 days of my time. I've had a lot of experience. This is good. And then, as I say, I started to see what everything else was going for here and realised that's just not going to happen. That's never going to happen. And in the end, I had to create a little teeny bit of myself because I wanted to keep that idea of proximity model and charging more for my time and the one-to-one. But actually, what I had to do with that then was say, if we just divided up my price for, if it was a daily rate, which I'm trying to move away from, but if it was for my time, how low could I do 2 hours for? Because that's probably all they're going to buy. And I tried to do as well a coaching program. So what we sold on was a small version of me, which we called the business Reboot. And we did also the get together for a cohort for 3 months and have coaching, but you all contribute, and there's 6 to 10 people in the room to do that, because we just knew we couldn't do the straight out of boot camp into a 2-day workshop with me onto a bigger program.
So just in summary, tell us what your product funnel looks like now, what the name of it is, the price point of it is, and the point of it is.
Yeah. So we still use we still use boot camps as the model for getting local people into us and for us generating real life test beds for all our stuff. So we're helping local businesses to get bigger. And so we used Glasgow and Edinburgh. That was another shock to me that you can't get people to go.
That I really wanted.
Yeah, it was a bit of a shocker to realise that there was a bit called no man's land in between, and they wouldn't go to either place. You have to go to both yourself. So we run the boot camp in both cities, and we run them every quarter. But what we've got as our major products then here is actually we did find a bunch of people who were ready to spend a reasonable amount to be on a programme with me for 6 months. And so after sort of about 7 or 8 months of being out doing the boot camps, every 3 weeks, one in one city, 3 weeks later, one in the other city, 3 weeks, one. And we did that throughout the whole of last year from April through to Christmas. We'd got 2 major products that we were going to use as our upsells, and they were a £29 a month business club, because a lot of people travel a tremendous amount of distance to get to things, even if it's in a city. So you think Glasgow and Edinburgh are big cities, but the whole of Scotland only has the population of, a quarter of London or something. It's really small. And so what you have to think is people are travelling sometimes 2 or 3 hours to get to one of my boot camps. So the club, a paid membership, was an ideal way to give those people some ongoing support.
Okay, so the boot camp, how much is the boot camp?
Boot camp early bird 79. Strangely started at 49, got more buyers when I put it up to 79. So there is a value perception here. So when I thought that the message I was getting was too expensive, actually not necessarily. So 79 for early bird, 147 for full price.
Okay, and then from
roughly about 10 days before. From that, they can go to literally at £29 a month this year to get into the business club, goes up to 49 from January onwards.
Okay, and is that an online membership club, or what happens in that?
It's an online membership club where they get their 4 boot camps a year for free, so they can come to the quarterly boot camps, and our boot camps are quarterly aligned. And they can come to those to get their 90-day plan of action for the next thing that we should be focusing on. They get me every Monday morning at 7 o'clock doing a Monday morning momentum, which for me is not that easy because I'm an evening person. So I have to be up a little bit early. Right? I have to really G myself up for a Monday morning momentum.
Karen comes alive around about 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
This is it. So they get Monday morning momentum, which has themes going through the week. There's accountability threads. They get an opportunity to have an accountability call with me every month as well. So there's a half an hour accountability call, one-to-one with me on Zoom, as well as then there are the masterclasses and other deals. There's basically £3,000 worth of value for 348 quid.
Nice. And they do that as a year subscription they sign up to?
They can sign up for a year or just £29 a month with no questions asked if you need to leave.
Nice. So really similar to Changemaker then.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then what happens next in your funnel?
In the funnel then, we do have some things which are our masterclasses. And the masterclasses are smaller groups, so only sort of 10 people perhaps, or 12 people in the room maximum. A lot more hands-on and a lot more deep on one subject rather than shallow on a certain theme that I've given the event. So boot camps are like a workshop meets a networking, around 40 to 60 people. 60 would be my ideal. I've realised again, I used to beat myself up last year, but then I realised that national events here in Scotland for things like the Speakers Association, those sorts of things, can get 15 or 20 people attend. And that's like something that's quarterly.
Wow.
For me to consistently every 3 weeks or now every quarter to get 35 to 40 people into something actually is a miracle. So I've had to change my expectations and understand the whole environment that I work within. So that's been interesting. So there are some masterclasses which, as I say, are a bit deeper, and those normally $197, but to members of the business club, they get them for £97 to come to those. And the reason I don't have to charge that much for those is actually the masterclasses are a bonus prize, a bonus day for the people who are on my 6-month programme. Right. And my 6-month programme demonstrates my journey since I came here to Scotland. I believe in go first. And so I'm showing them exactly what I'm doing and spilling the beans on everything I've learnt, what worked, what didn't, how it's worked for my friends but hasn't worked for me. All of that stuff is what I sort of teach. And that means I can, in the Unknown to Expert programme, I can literally show them from starting off, people being completely unaware of me. I was the new kid on the block, to becoming one of many. What was I called? Carol? Did I do something about coaching? Oh, there's lots of coaches here in Scotland. To actually one of few, it's Karen, the Ideas into Action business coach, the one that does the boot camps, to one of, you know, the one and only that they want. And there's no accident, of course, that that's all musical as well, from New Kids on the Block to the one and only. Because
what people don't know,
I was just going to say,
you were in a band.
35 years. You can take the girl out the band, but you can't take the band out the girl. So I can demonstrate.
Your model has focused so much on the face-to-face event stuff because that's what Scotland was needed. Used to. Yeah. But when they're in that program and they're used to networking and doing business in that way, you educate them to the digital side, which is your membership, which is basically really where you want your mass market to be in that membership area, right?
Because that's the global expansion, right?
Yeah, exactly. For me, the difference between this business and my 6-figure business previously for the last sort of 30 years or the last 15 years when it was a 6-figure business, is that I can scale this. And I couldn't scale my former business because I was a consultant jobbing and working and doing things. It relied too much on me. And what I've also learned from this, doing things on the ground, is because I knew all the lessons about creating courses and creating digital assets, that every workshop and every boot camp becomes a digital asset. So the first workshop, the first boot camps that I ran were called the 7 Things You Need to Know to Create a Successful Business That You Love. And it was the 7 biggest lessons I'd learned in the last 4 years of having to learn how to work in this new environment.
Yeah.
But then when I went forward from there, the second boot camp that I created and started running from August onwards was called Social Media Strategy Business Boot Camp. Who would have known that a girl who didn't use Facebook or social media for business 3 years before would have enough knowledge to teach other people how to do a social media strategy and why they needed one?
They're probably still on dial-up, aren't they, in Scotland?
We don't talk about that.
I moved to a town that didn't have fibre and didn't realise till I was living it.
Exactly.
Sore subject.
I like that because I think there's going to be loads of coaches that are watching this that are in that trap of swapping time for money, and they need to be able to expand and work better on their terms. But even learning, as you've done, how to do courses, how to do this, you still need to adapt it in a way that your audience and your avatar is going to consume it and want it.
One of the key things that really springs to mind here, and I apologise, I've got a bit of a cough, so I'm just going to keep myself off the side for a little while. But one of the things that really is present for me is, you don't, whatever you're doing, have to reinvent the wheel. You actually can take something old and put it into a new market. Or you can go to somewhere else. So, for example, you might visit somewhere in Europe or somewhere in America, see something that they're doing, and then actually take that, modify it a little bit, and put it into a new market. And so what I love about, I love so many things about your story anyway. And the fact that you've come in, because, as everybody watching this will know, avatar, 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 and more avatar, it's all about how do you serve the people with what the people need and want, and how do you create the desire and actually take them on the journey. So what I love about what you've done is you are beginning to create the demand that you thought might have been there straight away. You've had to go back a step and go, okay, how do we get to this bit and what do we need to put in here? So the fluidity with which you've had to actually kind of move and create is what actually happens. And that's why I love the whole brand around ideas into action, right?
Yeah. Some of the stuff for me about that has been, as you say, that I've said bands for a start. I've been in cover bands all my life. I'm used to taking somebody else's material and turning it into something new, doing something with it. And so that whole concept has been with me forever. But you're right that we've sort of adapted what we do. And some of the things that we thought we would do much later, we didn't think we'd do a paid membership site until 2019. But what became apparent was that one of the things that might sell here is a £29 a month for less than because of the cautious nature of the buyer. And so that was a big lesson for us, and we brought that forward. We then, as I say, escalated, and we sort of now talk about two main products. Although I'll do one-to-one coaching, and I have one-to-one coaching people and a handful of those, and I have people who come in and still do that 2-hour business reboot with me. The two products that we go out and promote are get people into boot camps, but then the products are the business club or a £3,000 6-month program.
Wow.
And we're finding at either end of that spectrum. Now, both of those really were going to be 2019.
Yeah.
And we thought we'd have other things in the middle, but we've ditched the middle stuff and just tried to sort of work with people to exactly adapt to what they needed.
And that for me is also about that whole thing that we talk about as well, which is it doesn't have to be complicated. A funnel can be 3 products.
Yeah.
And actually you can do very well out of those 3 products.
When I go and talk to them about it, it's say it's £29 or it's 2,997. But actually I just say, I've got a product at 30 quid or one at 3,000. Let's have a talk.
So I think it's really interesting for people to know as well, Karen, because I'm sure many people are in or have been in your situation. Tell us a little bit about what you did in corporate land.
Yeah.
What made you want to jump? You spoke about it earlier about not having that capacity to grow. But also what drives you to do ideas into action specifically? Why that topic? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah. I mean, if you go back a million years when I had my first business, which it sort of feels like sometimes, I was born an entrepreneur. I was born in a household with a mad inventor and an entrepreneur. I didn't realise this till I was a teenager and began to realise other people's houses weren't like ours and other people's families didn't work in the way that ours did with their businesses and things. It took me a while to learn that. And at 14, you have to understand that same man handed me his copy of Think and Grow Rich. And so, you're just choosing your what you're going to do for your O-levels and going to go on and do A-levels and stuff. And that's important to your mum. But actually, if you can crack this, you will have cracked it and you will have made a good life for yourself and your family and people around you and the world. And I am still working to make this happen for me. Yeah. And he handed me this book. And like every good 14-year-old, I looked at him like he was nuts. I put the book on the side in my room. I went and bought myself a guitar and I joined a band. But then one thing led to another. My parents split up when I was 19. And my very first business was me falling back on what I'd learned around me and what was obviously sort of partly instilled within me. Yeah. I never really wanted a job. I didn't really know what my vocation was at that point, what I was supposed to do in life. But I found myself overnight without anywhere to live. I was at college, so I had no income. And my parents split up. And suddenly I was homeless. And I did the usual. I went down to the pub with everybody else in the band and drank a few things, not alcohol, because I never do. And at the end of an evening playing pool, I swapped my keys with a guy called Dave. And I took his blue van and he had my lovely 6-year-old car. And for 5 months, I lived in a van on a car park and made wooden arts and crafts, which I sold at market stalls. And which I did house parties for wooden jigsaws and wooden kids' toys. It's a bit unheard of, but I like the house party concept because I got fed and it was warm, and then I could go back to my van. So my first business was that, but then I went into sales, and sales taught me a lot of things. I was with big companies like Souchard's, and I became a sales manager very quickly because sales I was really good at. I could talk, and people could teach me what to say. So that was fine, but I accidentally then ended up through this series of sales moves going to a company that sold computers to GPs. And that got me involved in
Will Smith.
I know.
Pursuit of Happiness story.
And so that began in 1987, my love of all things public service, the NHS, and looking after public service organisations. And gradually, on and off, I had various businesses. I'd had other businesses. I did car hire business with my dad, motor caravan business with my dad a bit later on. I've had property businesses and stuff. But I had my own business then working with the NHS and the public sector. And through in the middle of that sort of period of 30 years of working with the public sector, there were 6 years where I had to become directly employed. I became a chief exec in the NHS and a director in the NHS at the country's biggest PCT, because I was abolished by the government twice. Because they come in and they say they're going to change everything.
Yeah.
If your business is dealing with that public sector, suddenly your whole client base has gone. And what I began to realise partway through this happening after the first time and into the second time was actually people hate change. I quite like major change. And actually the thing they buy from me is that I can help them make major change because I get stuff done. I take their staff with me and I make complex things simple. So for pretty much 30 years, I've made huge transformations happen in the NHS and public sector organisations, whether that's opening hospitals, changing the whole corporate sort of structure of all the organisations in a whole city like Birmingham, whilst maintaining the care for 1.1 million people. All of those things, those have been the size and scale of projects that I've worked on and dealt with. But what I created for myself, even the final time round with Karen M Yates Associates Limited, I created a business where I could get to 6 figures. Finally, I'd got it. Through the 90s, my accountant had been slapping me saying my pricing structure was rubbish and I just made myself a job. And he was right. By 15 years ago, I realised I get this now. And I had a proper structure and I was working myself with people, delivering stuff that I loved, making huge changes happen. But it was still relying on me being face-to-face with the customer or me working here in an office somewhere on the customer's work. I couldn't have paid holidays. And if I didn't want to employ staff and turn out the Karen Yates model of transformation, which wasn't what they were buying me.
Yeah.
Then I couldn't. I had to water it down or change it or have staff, and I didn't want to do that. I'd had enough staff under my wing in NHS circles to know that I love it, they love me, but it drains me. And so that wasn't going to be my model. So I knew by 2010, I knew something had to change. I'd got a 6-figure business consistently year on year at that point, but I couldn't get any further with it. And I didn't know how to scale. And I knew I wanted something else because I'm one of those people that lives with a whisper of discontent, just quietly going in the back of my head. And so what I did from that, 2010 was a watershed year. There was a major thing in our family where I unexpectedly lost somebody very close to me. And that makes you re-examine everything. And the upshot was that I decided not only was I changing my relationship of 25 years, but I was going to change my business model and perhaps my business avatar. And I was going to move to Scotland as well. By 2014, we'd found a house in Scotland and we still didn't know how to change from working in the Midlands and having this absolutely idyllic place up here by the sea in Scotland. And we still had that conundrum to work through. But I think the thing that drives me, as I say, is a whisper of discontent that I don't think anybody could ever explain. That's partly nurture and partly nature. You know, my nan was had a business in the war. She was a woman who was one of the, a big businesswoman in Birmingham at that point. There weren't many women doing big things. So I think there's part of it nurture, part of it nature. But I think now I look at the people who are in my boot camps and I realise very early on, it's full of people like my dad.
Oh,
People
wow.
read, think and grow rich. The people who go to those events, who go to things and desperately want to do something.
Yeah.
And that's why Ideas into Action is what I'm all about, because I've had public sector organisations do it. And that's the crux of what I want them to do. I make them leave with a 90-day plan. I say the gap between where they are now and where they want to be, the gap stands for get a plan. 90-day plan of massive action. That's what we're doing. I help them to bridge the gap. And they're looking for things normally. They're looking for little building blocks for other people and programs and projects to build the gap.
Tactics.
They make the bridge.
Yeah.
But only they can make the bridge. They have to work out which of these things is going to work for them. Having that pile of stuff is not going to help. Nobody else can build the bridge.
So this is always an awful question to ask any one of our peers, but what is a typical day in your, in your world?
Well, I sort of have 3 typical days.
Okay.
Coaching days, where it's as stressful as me trolling down from upstairs in our house, catching some breakfast as I walk through the kitchen, trolling my way up the garden to my office, sitting myself down, if it's sunny, have the door open and start the Zoom calls, which is perfect. And occasionally entertain people with a little hand coming in from Kate, my other half, delivering some toast. That's not on the screen as people are going, toast. So those days are great because I get
Or a wagging tail, because, you know, Karen is a fellow dog owner.
Dogs around here, yeah. So those days are great because I get to converse with people in the business club, because everybody in the business club gets a half-an-hour call with me. So that's really nice. Or there's people who I'm coaching. I've got a few people who I'm coaching from 6 figures to 7. So they're on my sort of journey, really the top end of that.
Yeah.
And there are just people who are on our 6-month program who want some of the learnings that they've done with me in Facebook Live to be embedded with sort of some one-to-one. How would this apply? And so we do those sort of subjects. So that's great. There are coaching days and I love them.
Yeah.
And I usually come out of those buzzing with loads of ideas as I've re-talked things through with them and shown them tools. I always come out with a sheet of paper with I've got this great new tool, Kate. You know, it's just sometimes well received and sometimes not, because I have SOS, shiny object syndrome.
Entrepreneurs, Karen.
I'm made for this. Then I've got creative days. So those are the days where I've literally got to create material, whether that's the workbooks. We're a big one for, you know, the business club. Has a lot of materials in it, so we create lots of things to go in there and tools for them. We've got our learning labs where we store all of that, and then we've got each one of our boot camps and the U2E program. They have boot camps have a 50-page workbook, and there are 80-page workbooks every month with the Unknown to Expert program. Yeah. So those take me a while to get all those exercises in and get those sorted. So that's a constant flow, and we have a strategy day every quarter. And now, just recently,
a strategy day for you and Kate to work on the business.
Yeah, to work on the business every quarter without fail, and possibly sometimes more regularly than that, depending on what's going on.
We don't know what you're talking about.
Absolutely no, I wouldn't think so. The state of affairs, and then we've got within those days as well. Obviously now we're doing things like launches that are wider than Scotland. So we've had to designate that every Thursday is a marketing day, that we have one day a week where we only work on stuff for purely marketing stuff, because we're having to learn, and we've had to take on a marketer locally and the marketer in London. Because the UK launch and our ideas about launch strategies that I'd learned in all this work that I'd done with the Entrepreneurs Academy and everybody else that I'd coached with and for down south, none of that works up here directly. And if you employ a marketer up here, they've never done it. They don't have any clients who do what I do in the way that I do it. So we've had to have 2 sets of marketing. So we've got a marketing day every week. So that's part of that. And then, of course, there's event days. And event days are just, we've got regular places, Radisson Blu. So it's nicely set up. We're there from 7:30. So it's a bit more scary on a Glasgow day because we've had to get up at like 4 to be there at 7:30 to set up the room, to get everything the way we want it. We're really pernickety about the detail. Kate and I both run these together, which is lovely. Everybody's sort of taken to that team sort of effort on there, which is great. But it does mean once we've got everything set up, we've got sort of 3 things we do. One of which is just we go over the aims for the day. Yet again, one final little check. What's the aim for them? And what's the aim for us? What do we want them to go out with? And how do we want them to feel? And what do we want to actually upsell, or what do we want to get them to?
Poor intentions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Can't imagine where I learnt that.
Can't imagine where you learnt that, Karen.
In fact, I think I've quoted it in one of our books.
So too.
And then we've got we're big Grey's Anatomy fans, and so we're quite fans. We saw it there first of the superpower stance. So we have just a minute to do our quick superpower stance at the top of the room, looking over the room to make sure everything's right, and we've got this, you know. And then Kate goes out to meet everybody front of house, and I juggle, but juggling's a great, because you can't think of anything else when you're juggling, really. So I walk around the room, everything's the way that I like it, and I just juggle. I've done that for years, before events, before gigs. It's been a great.
You have to have a go at this.
Any event that I run with you, Karen, I've never seen you juggle.
No, I've never done it at any of the events that we've been down together where we've run stuff. I've never done it there. But in my own events and the things I run myself, I usually try and get myself a quiet space somewhere where I can stand at the back, walk around and juggle.
I'm seriously going to do that now. Oh, God. Seriously.
It's in the main room for the event, then it's loud music and juggling. But it's just a great way to just focus in. And it's making me focus properly on what I'm interested in for the day.
Awesome.
That's great.
So what would you say, Karen, is probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks that you've had to overcome in this journey that you just described?
Probably moving to a new country was, I'll say, being abolished by the government twice in my old business was, you might say, careless. But doing it to yourself and being an expert in a field in England and saying, let's move to Scotland, and just packed 3 businesses into the back of a van on the 16th of August 2016 and saying, off we popped then, let's see how these work in Scotland. When you know you've got no friends, no family, no business connection. And the public sector here has been different since 2004. So there's no way that what I can do, directly equates without me having to shoehorn my way in. Absolutely, the lessons are transferable and the methods and technologies and the tools are. But I couldn't even resurrect my old business here. So I was now going to be 4 or 5 hours away from my nearest business contract in my existing business. So trying to
Karen, isn't that one chapter in Think and Grow Rich called Burning Your Bridges?
It is. And I on my free group today, I post on a Tuesday I do something called #works for me. And today's was go all in. I'm a burning girl. Go all in works for me. That's the mindset I go with. And I don't know, as I say, whether that comes from nurture or nature, but it is to just you're not there. Nothing changes till something changes. Just do it. So that's the hardest bit.
So here's a question for you, just to put you on the spot. Do you have someone that really, truly inspires you? Who in particular? Who is that mentor that you go to and get inspiration from?
Do I've talked about this with the guys in our club before, and for me, I've always had a sort of a board of people in my head who are the people that I have for advice. So my accountant in the 90s was my equivalent to my director of finance for my business. So I didn't have to go every quarter, but I did. Whether or not I was there to talk business with him, to try and understand what I was supposed to be doing. So originally, it's got to be my dad who was my main mentor, but I didn't realise it at the time. We were so similar that we sort of, we had this relationship where we were so similar. We could work really well together sometimes, but at other times we would clash tremendously. And he's been gone now since 2004. So it's been a long time not having him around, but I still hear his words in my head. I can see his expression now on my face from the inside. I can feel his expression. I don't know whether that's good or bad, but if I start to smoke a pipe, I'll get worried. He was an avid pipe smoker for most of his life. So he's got to be one of those people on my board. And then I went on from those sort of people to discovering people like Tony Robbins, and his 90 days of massive action has never left me. And that's what I tell people to do now, is focus and wrap things around 90 days. But if I talked these days, I guess 2014-ish, I was into Brendan Burchard and all of his stuff, which I thought was great and lovely, and I would still look at his stuff as being super. That, of course, led me to take more notice of Oprah than just the woman off the telly. It's just miraculous, because of what she does. And I want to do something bigger. I want to do something that helps people who can't afford what we actually charge for. We have a rule in our business that we only charge 80% of the people in a room will have paid full price. And everybody in the room knows this because we tell them at every opportunity. And 20% of the people may not have been able to pay anything to be with us today, or may have bartered something with me. If they can create me a logo or do me something on Canva, then we'll barter for it, because they need the knowledge now, but they can't afford it. So we have the 80-20 thing that we want to do. If I thought, where did I stand? Where would I like to stand? Who would I like to be like and emulate? I think I would like to be somewhere between Amy Porterfield and Tacky Moore. And I do in a way that I love. I think that's great. But I still think it comes back to parents. My mum is 86. She has just moved to Scotland to join us here in another country, having lived in Birmingham and the Midlands for the whole of her 86 years. She's battled all sorts of illnesses, and she's had tragedies in her life, like the death of my brother and all sorts to deal with. And she just up sticks and moves here and buys a brand new house, living on her own, and she's phenomenal. So I think some of that wouldn't be a bad thing to have either, would it?
Sure, a lot of that's rubbed off on you already, Karen. We can see it in you anyway.
I hope.
So if you went back to your early days, because I think this stage of you jumping ship from corporate land and doing your own stuff is a real valuable lesson and time for people watching this interview. What advice would you give yourself back at that early stage?
I don't know where I heard this first, somewhere along the journey, and I believe it to be true, that it's the chances you don't take that you regret most in life? And maybe that's because I've reached 55 now, so you're looking back on quite a lot of it and thinking, yeah, I should have done that earlier. I should have done this earlier. I should have done that earlier. I should have listened to my accountant in the 90s, obviously, would be a great piece of advice. So listen to your accountant when you say you're not charging enough, and seriously consider whether your business model has a glass ceiling on it, those sorts of things from a business perspective. But in life and in business, it's the things you don't try and the things you don't do that you regret the most. So don't settle. Don't see yourself settling. Don't just think you can stay in your comfort zone and not stretch, because actually my life is happiest in stretch. That's where I am happiest. My dad, when he went, he had a series of affirmations, which I didn't realise I thought they were shopping lists on the side of his, on the table by his telly seat. And when I looked at them, I was left with 100 of these slips.
Oh,
and
wow.
the top one, even though he'd been terminally ill for 18 months and living on his own, he was still thinking this stuff and believing this stuff. And the top one said, I have the power to overcome any challenge that may come my way and make my life what I want it to be. And I think that's right. As a mantra,
yeah.
I would tell every youngster, I was walking around with one of our young great nephews the other day in my arms, and I was telling him this. He's like 4 months old. I'm starting very early with this.
Start them young, definitely.
I think that's the nub of it. There's nothing you can do.
No, when you
don't hold yourself back.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. So, what's next for you, lady?
Well, got a rest. No, well, we're still only part way through this journey because of the fact that we landed in this place and realised our plans aren't as good as we thought they were, because they'll be great for later, but this is not the model for now. We're perhaps 6 to 9 months behind where we would have wanted to be at this point in the development of our business. But we've, as I say, gone down other routes. We've brought forward the business club, we've brought forward the 6-month programme. So for me, there's a lot about marketing and visibility now. We have to break free of just being a local business. I've shown them now how they can open a business from naught, literally from naught to 60 in the first 8 weeks and get your first business boot camp full. And how you can then start to build a group and how you can then start to get traction. You can live off the income from that. So we've shown them all of that. And we've created the Unknown to Expert program for the people that want to take their businesses a whole heap further, faster. But we need to now capitalise on all the assets we've created. Yeah, we have so many assets. We have to, do UK-wide for the business club, UK-wide for the Unknown to Expert Accelerator program. Those are 2 major things for this year. So doing our first launch, that's a proper sort of national launch of that, and then converting all of the boot camps and the masterclasses we've done so far into online courses, because that's the fabric of having something that works for you when you're asleep and when you're on holiday, which I didn't have in my old business model, which will make the difference to us between 6 figures and 7.
Yeah, because that's all of that stuff is what London and people like that are used to learning digitally and doing that. So you don't have to teach them anything new. You've already got the content. You just put it in a scalable.
Absolutely. So it's good. And I guess if I was thinking about real life and if I was listening to Kate, I would also say get fit. I spend far too much time just wheeling myself down the garden into here. And I really do seriously need to make an effort to get fit.
You know what?
I thought I'd hear myself say.
I reckon at some point soon you'll wake up and you'll suddenly see like an obstacle course, knowing Kate, like you'll see some sort of kind of like,
this is the route to get to the office down the garden. You've got to scale these 3 walls.
Right?
I have actually polished off my bicycle and got it out of the shed a few weeks.
You've got to write it. Ideas into action.
I took it.
Yes, we would very much like you on the back of this to post a picture of you riding your bicycle.
Yeah, well, I did take it out a couple of weeks ago when my van got MOT'd and nobody was here to take me back to the garage, and I thought, how do I get across town? And I thought, blimey. So it wasn't a social media opportunity. It was a photograph of me looking and the bike. And all I can say is the first hill I met where I had to get off, if I hadn't had the bike to hold me up,
you wouldn't have
you were no longer there. I'd done a mile across town. I reached the first hill. I thought, I'll have to get off here. I can't get up this hill. And I stood there by the side of my bike thinking, these things don't move, do they?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a definite must.
So I know you're like us, Karen. You love gadgets and devices and stuff, basically, that makes life easier.
do.
Give us a couple, one or two of your top apps, software, gadgets that you wouldn't want to live without, basically.
Well, aside from the actual technology, so, iPad, I'm now a Mac user due to you girls. Well, not necessarily Helena, I'm still veer with you.
No.
But I could never have done in any of my businesses without Dropbox or something similar, and Dropbox has been my baby for years. It's so great for storing all the stuff. It's allowed me, when I've taken on the marketers, to be able to let them into my marketing assets folder, and they could see all the stuff stacked up there ready waiting for them to use and see. Evernote, I think, is a great thing. I love that because particularly here in Scotland, we have a big problem with stuff Kate will make changes to something on Dropbox, and it will possibly take hours to go up there and come down for me to see it. But on Evernote, it's instant. So I don't know what the difference is here with that. So we love Evernote. Zoom for these sorts of things would never be without it. Canva, surprisingly, considering I spent the first 2 months swearing at it. Now I lovingly refer to it as idiosyncratic, but once you've got used to its idiosyncrasies, we do everything on it. Nobody produces any of our stuff but us, and even the workbooks, the 80-page workbooks, they all come off Canva. So that's excellent too.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget that they can do workbooks and stuff on Canva. They just think about memes, but
Most recently, with my coaching clients and myself, I've been telling them to use something called Active Voice. I used to use Dragon Dictation, and that hasn't upgraded for Apple recently, so it just won't work. So I changed to Active Voice, and that allows me to talk my things into the phone while I'm driving, while I'm walking, whatever I'm doing. And then, of course, it will produce it and say, where do you want to send it to? And it writes it up for you. And it's not bad at translating for my accent and stuff, so that's quite good. Amazing. And that means you can create content on the fly. And, of course, for people that find it difficult to create content, a lot of my clients are really sort of struggling with how do I create this stuff? They can talk much happier than they can write. So I just thought, talk into this. It's now written. Why don't you give it to the copywriter? They can help you to turn it into something. So I think that's an absolute must these days, something like that to produce stuff quicker.
Yeah, perfect. That's really good. A lot of people that find it that whole psychology of actually sitting down and writing something. Oh, I'm dyslexic, or I don't know how to structure it. It's like, if you just talk it works. Completely. If you're a speaker or a coach, you spend most of your time talking anyway. So it should be.
So why not, right?
Pretty easy for you.
Yeah, it's good.
That's awesome. Thanks, Karen. I know there's a lot in there that we use, and some real foundational, essential ones that everybody watching this, if you're not, definitely make your life a lot easier.
I think they're pillars of my business now. Those 5 things in particular are 5 key pillars to the business.
Yeah, it's really quite amazing how helpful it is. So here's the big question. I'm pretty certain that many people will want to connect to you. So what is people's best way of connecting to you? Obviously, we will put you into the Changemaker group. But I'm sure that they might want to check out some of these reams of things that you've got. So where should they go, hun?
So I guess to chat with me, it's Facebook, because I'm on the Facebook page like all the while doing stuff.
What's the page called?
Karen M Yates, M for Margaret, for mother. Karen M Yates, Ideas into Action. So we've got the Ideas into Action.
Put all the links in the
together. We've got our free group, Ideas into Action Collective, which there's a lot of Scottish people in here, so it's quite localised at the moment, but 560 people or something, of which about 500 are local to here, but 60 are all over the place, all over the world, actually, strangely. It's an odd mix then of where people come from. But the website is KarenYates.com. I cheated and made it really simple for everybody. When they say what the business called, it's called KarenYates.com. It's the digital arm of my old business, Karen Yates Associates Limited, so I'm relatively easy to find.
Perfect. Brilliant.
It's amazing. Like, truly, thank you so much for sharing the changes, and so openly and honestly as well, because I think one of the reasons why we do these Backstage inspirations really is to give people the opportunity to go, oh, I can do it differently, and you've had to. And what I love about it is the attitude with which you've done so, because it's just like, okay, here's this next thing, and what can we do? So thank you for your time on behalf of all of the people watching.
Thank you for inviting me. As I say, it's lovely. I go to the talking and the opening of an envelope if I could talk at it. So share our journey. for me, it is about, you know, people come to lots of things, we do lots of things, we learn lots of stuff, but you don't need it to remain on the shelves behind you as shelf improvement. You have to implement, and you only actually get that if you hear real people's stories and you learn how you can adapt stuff yourself and find out that other people have to do it. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Awesome to have you, Karen. Have a good one. We'll see you soon.
All right, cheers.
See you. Bye.